Hi everyone and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Elsie.
And today we're looking at our topic-based writing unit, and it's all going to be about books and ebooks. Now, this isn't just about favorite books. What kind of genre do you like to read? Where do you read? When do you read? It's actually more about what actual material do you read?
Oh, so between printed books and ebooks.
Yeah, and there's, if we have time, I'll throw in another one which doesn't actually get mentioned at all, audiobooks.
Audiobooks.
Which are a big part of the market and a big part of what people read these days. But what about you? Do you have an e-reader?
I don't have an e-reader, but I can read ebooks on my phone.
Okay. That's kind of a small screen, though. Do you get much out of it?
I normally just read probably for 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I'll rest my eyes. And then just move it along tomorrow.
Yeah, I had, back in the UK, I had hundreds of books because I like to read. But,
printed books.
Yeah, printed, just normal, regular books. When I moved to Taiwan, I had to sort of go, well, I'll bring like maybe a half dozen or a dozen of books that I really, really love and I know that I'm going to read again. But otherwise, one of my first things I'll try to find a bookshop. I'll try and find places where I can get more books. But the problem is, you just run out of space, and if you move house, you've got to take them with you, and it's a huge pain.
They can be bulky.
So for my 30th birthday, many, many years ago, my parents bought me a Kindle e-reader. And that was a big change because it just meant, great, I'm now switching to e-reader. I'll give away some of my old books. I'll send some back to England. I still have a handful around, often gifts, birthday gifts, but pretty much everything else I use either the e-reader and over the last few years, the library more.
Okay, and ebooks are less expensive and more portable.
Generally, yeah. And for me, it's just all about space. I don't have enough space at home to have all the books I like, but I can have 100 books on an e-reader. And I've got a cover that you can open like a real book.
So on the e-reader?
Yeah, it's like a book cover. So I still feel like I can open it and hold it like a book instead of a tablet. So
interesting.
I still get the kind of book reading experience. And I find I don't miss the printed pages and turning the pages and anything like that. So that is the topic, and that's what people are going to write about. The instructions for this writing are that more and more people are using smartphones, tablets, or e-readers to read e-books. Please write about e-books and printed books and explore their advantages and disadvantages, and then explain which kind of book you like for the conclusion.
今天的作文提示是，随着行动装置跟网络的普及，有越来越多人会使用手机、平板电脑或是电子书阅读器来阅读电子书。那请你以电子书与纸本书为题，分析比较两者的优缺点，并且说明自己的偏好。那文章需要分段，文长至少是120个单词。
So since this is about us and our opinions, we'll be using first person. I do this, I think this, I believe. And you'll be using present tense as it's what you usually do, what you generally think, and so on. Now, if there is a previous experience in the past that supports your argument for the second paragraph, then sure, maybe a past event written in past tense that influenced your decision. So yeah, change your tense for that, but otherwise you'll generally be using first person present tense.
那接下来到了 develop and approach 的地方，什么是论说文呢？论说文包含了就是论和说的部分。那论呢，指的是对主题的见解和主张，属于比较主观的论断。那说指的是解说和分析主题，属于比较客观的说明。常见的论说文类型有第一种，剖析某事物的优缺点和利害得失。第二个是比较两个事物的优缺点。第三个则是说明某事物的影响或是重要性。面对这个类型的题目呢，我们必须要提出理由，加以举证，分析原因，然后说明结果。
So the first part of this essay is looking at two things, books and ebooks, and you'll need to consider both. It is an easy mistake to concentrate too much on one thing or even ignore one of the things. So the key to making a good essay of this kind of compare and contrast type is to give an equal amount of space and words to each two things, not too much of one and not enough of the other.
那第二个要注意到的是写什么还有怎么写。英文作文的架构上呢，基本分为引言 introduction、主体 body 还有结论 conclusion。那类似中文的起承转合，所以本篇论说人也是用这样的架构发展。
So as with all essays, we need to have an introduction to let people know what the topic is about.
那 introduction 是文章的引言，说明书写此篇文章的动机。全文的主旨句也就是 thesis statement， 常在第一段就会点出来。那论说文的 introduction 可以有以下几种的写法：第一个，解释主题并说明要探讨这个主题的缘由；第二个，说明一般人或是专家对这个主题的看法；第三个，在统计或是学理上的报道和诠释也可以写出来。第四个，清楚表达个人的看法、相关的经验或是所支持的论点。
Your introduction should be short and get straight to the point. You'll need to use keywords such as books, ebooks, or reading fairly early on, and keep the introduction to one or two sentences to make things clear and to explain why you're making the points in your body. Don't do a big, long introduction or you'll run out of time and space.Body
呢，则是文章的主体，那必须要立论清楚，具有说服力，做出合理的说明，并且加上佐证的细节，也就是 supporting details。那分析 A、B 两个事情、两个事物的优缺点的时候啊，两者的优缺点要互相呼应对比。那常见的作文安排方式呢，第一种是一段说明 A 的优缺点，另外一段就说明 B 的优缺点。那第二种是一段说明 A、B 的优缺点，另外段则是说明 A、B 的缺点。
Now, I generally prefer the second approach, which is looking at the advantages of both and then the disadvantages of both, because it's easier for readers and writers to make direct comparisons. If you're doing all the stuff about books and then all the stuff about e-readers second, then the comparison is not quite as direct.Whereas it's easy to do it if you do advantages of both and disadvantages of both.
So you prefer the second way?
Definitely, and that is often how you are taught. That's certainly how I was taught to do it when I was a school kid growing up and comparing and contrasting things in essays.
所以把 A、B 放在一起说，先说优点，再说缺点，可能会比较清楚一些。那最后到了 conclusion 结论的部分，可以简单总结或是重申前面提过的要点，也可以提出建议。那这种方式的结论呢，可以使论述更加明确。
So your conclusion of the final part should wrap up your thoughts about books or ebooks. Don't add any new information to the conclusion. Just sum things up and bring things back around to that key point, that topic sentence or thesis statement that you started your essay with.
那接下来到了 brainstorming time。当我们遇到2选1的问题的时候呢，可以利用优劣分析表来找出最佳的选择。你可以在纸上画一个象限图，那看完题目之后呢，把你想到的优缺点分别写出来，最后再把这些写进你的 outline。So
here you kind of need 4 mini lists. Advantages of books, advantages of ebooks, disadvantages of books,disadvantages of ebooks. And there are many ways you could do this. You could just straight up write 4 lists or one big list or put them in 4 corners of a piece of paper with the word books right in the middle. But our magazine has provided a table, and we've used this kind of table before for these kind of essays where you've got advantages at the top and disadvantages on the bottom.Physical books on the left and ebooks on the right. Now, there are a few more complicated vocabulary words in this table. Don't worry too much about some of them now, like eye strain or distractions or annotation. We will cover what they mean. Just think about, okay, we've got advantages and disadvantages of both. And the key point when you're doing this list is at least try to make roughly equal numbers of each kind of category. And as you can see, each kind of book has 2 disadvantages and each has 3 or 4 advantages. Now, the fact that books have 4 advantages and ebooks only 3 may mean that this person probably prefers traditional books, but we'll kind of have to see as we put the whole thing together and look at the overall essay and discuss that later. So let's move on to making an outline and putting all of this information, this brainstorming, these little facts and advantages and disadvantages into proper sentences and getting them in the right order. And of course, in the outline, it's just the basic information. We can connect the sentences with transitions and add more details to illustrate the examples later on. So we start with paragraph 1, the introduction, which is, reading is a hobby enjoyed all over the world, and it's one of my favorite things to do. Now, what's good about this introduction is that it makes it very clear that this is about the writer's preference. It's one of my favorite things to do. And what that tells us is we're not going to be too objective in this essay. We're not going to be too neutral. We're saying that this is something that matters to me, the writer, and therefore I will have strong opinions. I won't necessarily be fair and look at both things equally. This matters a lot to me, so I'm going to say what I think. And setting that out in the introduction sets up what comes later in the paragraphs.
在今天的范文当中啊，我们在 outline 架构的部分看到呢，他的 introduction 开头直接说出了他自己的喜好是什么。好，所以他说啊，阅读是全世界人都喜欢做的事情，那他自己也是不例外的。接下来才会开始在比较这个电子书还有纸本书的优缺点。
So now we get into the details of the first paragraph, and it's the topic sentence for kind of the body bit is, today people have the option of reading real books or ebooks. A, ebooks are read on an electronic device, so that's kind of a factual statement. B, these devices are nice because they're convenient and can hold many books, so that's an advantage. C, they sometimes give me eye strain, disadvantage. And D, I get very distracted when reading on a tablet because it can connect to the internet. Another disadvantage. So this is all about ebooks, and the writer has taken approach 1 that we discussed earlier when we were talking about how to develop our approach.
好，所以在细节的部分呢，作者选择先带出电子书的优缺点。那说到呢，电子书携带方便，但是对眼睛不好，而且容易使人分心。那因为呢，如果你在平板上阅读的话，可以连到网络，所以这个是一个优点。那明显接下来呢，会说到的是纸本书。So the writer is going to talk about the printed books.
That's right, in the second paragraph. And again, they start with this topic sentence for this paragraph that is, again, very personal and shows that this is going to be a bit more kind of subjective, a bit more about what they think and like. It says, I have fond memories of going to my school library and picking out a book. And then it follows with an advantage. A, holding a real book in my hands gives me a feeling of magic and wonder. And then it does recognize a disadvantage. They, meaning books, can get expensive and take up a lot of space.
所以到了第二段的时候呢，你会发现作者开始针对自己的感觉、自己的观点来做分析。所以他说呢，他喜欢手拿着书，因为这给他一种神奇惊叹的感觉。但是呢，纸本书比较贵，而且占空间。他同时也带出了纸本书的缺点。
And the conclusion is, for me, the best option is to go to the library for a physical book. This way, I can get a book for free and return it when I'm done. So that basically says the writer has an approach that takes all the advantages of physical books and gets rid of the disadvantages. It does refer to some of our points, but it also ends with, again, a personal opinion. For me, the best option. And that's good because it matches our introduction, which we said showed the essay was going to be a personal take about something important to the writer. They're not really weighing up both sides of the argument and making like a kind of, I've thought about it in detail and I've decided that this one has more advantages. That's not what kind of essay it is. It's a personal opinion with personal ideas supported by actual evidence and advantages and so on.
最后呢，作者提出自己的选择，那这也是题目要我们做到的。好，他说呢，他喜欢到图书馆借实体书，还可以省钱。
So your outline, of course, you can add details, you add transitions when you turn it into a full essay. Just make sure you follow that logical structure that you've set out in your approach. Make sure it's got all the appropriate details to really add to your points and make it sound a little more creative. But do be careful, it can be easy to include too much information that's not really related to your point that you want to get across. This essay, as I've said, is a personal essay, so if you were adding some points that maybe weren't really relating to what you think and believe, maybe you can cut those out. They don't fit in this essay, which is very strongly about your personal opinion. And that's why doing an outline is so useful, because you can see, this maybe doesn't belong in this essay, or I need a bit more information. I need another supporting detail. You can find out all of that when you do your outline instead of realizing it later on and having to do a lot more rewriting. Okay, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to read through both of our samples and take a closer look at some of the words, patterns, and writing techniques in them. Hi everyone, welcome back. We're now going to read through our two samples, starting with the basic sample. Reading is a hobby enjoyed all over the world, and it's one of my favorite things to do. Today, people have the option of reading real books or ebooks. Ebooks are read on an electronic device like a tablet. These devices are nice because they're very convenient and can hold many books. However, they sometimes give me eye strain. I also get very distracted when reading on a tablet because it can connect to the internet. I have fond memories of going to my school library and picking out a book to read for the week. Holding a real book in my hands still gives me a feeling of magic and wonder. Unfortunately, they can get expensive and take up a lot of space. For me, the best option is to go to the library for a physical book. This way, I can get a book for free and return it when I'm done.
OK， 所以在 basic sample 里头呢，我们看到作者在引言当中，解释了主题，再来提出了电子书的优点，以及提出电子书的缺点，然后到了第二段的时候呢，他提出纸本书的优点，再来提出纸本书的缺点，最后做一个总结，也就是说明他个人的选择。
Yeah, we've followed the outline pretty closely here. We've covered all the advantages and disadvantages, and we've just added some definitions and extra details, like instead of just saying read on an electronic device, we've said an electronic device like a tablet. So there's an example. And there's a few more, but mostly it's just the outline, just a little bit fleshed out.
是的，所以基本上呢，这个基础范文就是跟着我们的架构 outline 在走的。那里面还用到一些很重要的字，像是 option， 这个名词是选择。Have the option of A or B， 那就是有两个选择，一个是 A， 一个是 B。那例句呢，我们可以说像是 You have the option of staying home or coming with us。你可以选择要待在家，还是跟我们一起，就是用到这样的句型。那再来像是 electronic device， 那就是电子装置。那还有一个很重要的用法是 give somebody eye strain， 那就是让人家的眼睛疲劳。那还有像是变得分心 get distracted。那美好的、喜欢的回忆就是用 fond 来形容 memories。那再来还有一个是 give somebody a feeling off 那就是给人某种感觉。那最后还有像是 take up 占据 take up a lot of space 那就是占据很多的空间。
Yes, a lot of these disadvantages don't apply to me with my Kindle because while I can connect to the internet, you can't really go and search online very well. You just connect to the internet to download whatever book you've bought. There are a few more things you can do with it, but I don't bother. And because it's a Kindle, it's on like e-ink, e-paper stuff, so there's no backlight, there's no blue light to distract your eyes. It really just looks as though you're holding a page of a book.
So it doesn't really give you eye strain?
No, not at all. It's just like reading a regular book.
That's great.
Yeah, and also the cover, I mentioned it's got a cover that can open and close like a book. It's got a built-in light. So that means that I can read it on a plane in the dark, or I can read it, in a room with low lighting, and I won't get eye strain again because it's got a nice light that doesn't shine and reflect off the screen because the screen's it's not too shiny. So yeah, it's pretty good. So that is the basic sample. Let's move on now to the advanced sample and see how things are different. Advanced sample. Although reading is a fundamental skill, possessing the ability to derive enjoyment from books is a talent. Luckily, in this modern age, there are many different ways in which people can consume literature. In recent years, we have seen an abrupt rise in the use of electronic devices, reading devices included. E-books allow a reader to store hundreds, if not thousands of titles on a single tablet. At the mere press of a button, the reader can change the font size, the color of the screen, and even look up the definition of a word. However, some users complain of eye strain and distractions when using internet-enabled tablets. On the other hand, physical books evoke a sense of disconnect from the outside world. A book allows us to fully immerse ourselves in the story by holding it in our hands. Books also allow for easier annotation and note-taking, which is essential when we're analyzing a story. Another benefit of physical books is the ability to loan out the books to friends. In this way, we can share and encourage a love of reading in our communities. On the downside, the cost of books is increasing as the world is more aware of the environmental costs of paper. In addition, many smaller homes simply lack the space for many books. Ultimately, for myself, I choose to read my books on an e-reader. The convenience that e-books afford the reader is an unbeatable advantage.
在我们的进阶范文当中呢，它文分4段呢，跟我们的基础范文不同。那在第一段引言的部分呢，它解释了主题，然后就到了第2段，提出电子书的优点，还有提出电子书的缺点。接着到了第3段，提出纸本书的优点以及纸本书的缺点。最后到了第4段，才提出结论，也就是说明个人的选择。
Yeah, we've got a lot of the same points here, just expressed with a little more complicated language, with extra details, with further explanations, especially the stuff about note-taking and analysing stories. We'll get to that in just a moment. Now, the introduction is more distant and less personal. So whereas the other one was like, oh, I love reading and I really like this, it's very personal. This one, it steps back. Talking about reading as a skill, the ability to enjoy books, different ways that people can consume it. There's no I in that entire first paragraph. Instead, it uses we. We as in people in general, we, society. So just from that choice of pronoun, I instead of we, you've got one that's very personal and this one which is more analytical, looking and really thinking about it. And the personal stuff doesn't even come in until the very final conclusion.
是的，在最后这个 very final conclusion 结论的当中呢，你会看到他因为方便性而选择了电子书。那在分析优缺点的时候呢，作者先说优点，再说缺点。那在电子书的那一段当中呢，用 however 带出缺点，接着用 on the other hand 另一方面带出对纸本书的分析，然后再用 on the downside 带出纸本书的缺点。
So let's now take a look at some of the vocabulary words and phrases from this advanced sample. In the first sentence, it talks about deriving enjoyment from books. Derive basically means get or obtain. You get something from something else.
也就是从点点点当中获得。
And then the book or the passage talks about e-readers being able to hold thousands of titles. Now, the title, of course, can mean just the few words that tell you what the main title of the book is. This book is called this. But titles in this case means the whole book. If you say a bookstore stores thousands of titles, it means the entire books. It's just another way to refer to a work.
Title 这个字呢，在我们的范文当中当的是书本来解释。那它另外的意思呢，还有像是标题，好，或是书名。
Then we've got the word font. One advantage of e-readers is that you can change the font size. The font is basically the characteristics of the words, the print. Now, it could be different fonts. Some people use something called Times New Roman. Others use Arial. There are a whole bunch of different ways. And it's about how the letters look, whether they slant, whether the T's have got different kinds of crosses or tails. And font size just means how big the words are on a screen.
Font 指的是字形，那 font size 就是你字体的大小。
And then when the writer starts talking about physical books, they say they evoke a sense of disconnect. To evoke is to create something, to kind of call that thing into being, to conjure it up and create.
唤起的意思。
And it evokes a disconnect, and the best books can disconnect you from the world. It's kind of saying it takes you out of the real world. You stop thinking about your own life and whatever problems or things you're doing, and your mind enters the story world, and you're completely plugged into that story, ignoring the things that are going on around you and just going where the story takes you.
这边呢，就是 connect 的相反字 disconnect， 指的是抽离。
And in doing that, you would immerse yourself in the book. To immerse means you kind of get yourself completely covered. If you immerse yourself in water, you go so it's over your head. So to immerse yourself in a book means you just get lost in the story. You lose track of time. You look up and, wow, I've read like 100 pages and it's nighttime.
所以 immerse oneself in something 那就是沉浸于某事当中，埋头做某事。
And these ebooks can help with annotation, which means basically making notes in the book to say, oh, this word means this, making a little you can write in the margin or write underneath the word to say this is how you pronounce this, or here's another reference. Now, you can do that with ebooks. It's just you have to learn how.
也就是注解的意思 annotation.
Yeah, then we've got the word downside, which is just another way of saying disadvantage or problem or bad thing.
也就是缺点。
And then finally, we have the word unbeatable. The ability to store many books on one e-reader is an unbeatable advantage. Means you can't beat it. It's just the top thing.
对，比不上的，因为呢，已经是最好的了。
Okay, so that covers a lot of the words and phrases there. The rest of them are pretty obvious from their content, and we are out of time. Thank you very much for talking. It's a shame we didn't get to cover audiobooks. It's kind of a whole
maybe
different...
next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. Maybe I'll suggest that as like audiobooks really are a topic that's worth discussing, but we'll have to leave that for another time because we are done for the day. Thank you very much for listening. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.